So the Pokemon Company International have officially come out and said that the next rotation for our 2025 format will be on April 11th, which we kind of already knew because Journey Together comes out near the end of March, so then you just add on 2 weeks, because for some reason in Pokemon the set only becomes standard legal 2 weeks after it releases, so we already know what day it was going to happen, but now we have the official confirmation that it is going to be April 11th. So compared to last year's rotation, this one is going to be a lot bigger in terms of what we're going to be losing from the game. Last year's rotation, there was only like a handful of like important cards that kind of left, and then there was also, Mew VMAX that went out of the game, which was an entire deck. The E regulation went out. The format was relatively still the same. Obviously there were a bunch of decks that had some very important cards leave the format, which meant that their power level was dipped down a little bit, but every deck that was being played around that time was still seeing play after the 2024 rotation, minus obviously like Mew VMAX and Urshifu in Lugia and stuff like that. However, 2025 is going to be a lot different, because all of the sets that were released in 2022 up until 2023 with Crown Zenith are going to be leaving the game, and this is going to have a much, much bigger impact on the game than 2024's rotation did. So last time I did one of these videos, I went over like a couple of key cards that would be leaving and all that kind of stuff. It was kind of a rushed video and I didn't really know what I was talking about back then. However, this time I'm going to be doing things a little bit differently. I'm going to be going through each individual set and picking out key cards that are going to be leaving the game. We have 6 sets to get through. Most of it isn't going to be important, but there are going to be some very heavy hitting cards in the later half. So the first set we had from the F block, which is the set of cards that will be leaving, was Brilliant Stars, released on February 25th in 2022. So this set brought about the introduction of V-Star Pokemon, and already Arceus V-Star is a big one. At the time this card was very strong. It was paired with other V Pokemon thanks to its Trinity Nova ability, not only doing a large amount of damage but then allowing you to fuel up other V Pokemon and get them powered up. Not to mention his V-Star power was probably one of, if not the best in the game, letting you just search your deck for any 2 cards you wanted. A very strong card that over time started seeing less and less play in the format, and as of now it doesn't really see a whole lot of play. It's kind of been power crept, but it's still a noteworthy card that is going to be leaving the game. Some more V cards to mention are Entei V and Raikou V, their fleet-footed ability, letting you draw a card while they're in the active spot. They also both had a pretty decent attack with their Rondo attacks, doing 20 damage plus an additional 20 more damage for every Pokemon that was on the bench. Entei V saw a little bit of play in a couple decks here and there. Raikou V has seen a large amount of play in Miraidon, especially with the release of Surging Sparks and Pikachu, allowing you to make use of the Area 0 Underdepths, meaning that your Raikou V can hit even bigger amounts of damage because you can just use Tandem Unit from Miraidon to put down some bench Pokemon, maybe even another Miraidon, use that Tandem Unit to put down even more bench Pokemon, and quickly fuel up your bench and do a lot of damage with Lightning Rondo. Also, Raichu V is going to be leaving the game, another card that was played in Miraidon. With its Dynamic Spark, you can discard any amount of lightning energy from this Pokemon and it does 60 damage for each one discarded in this way. A very, very powerful attacker alongside Raikou V. Another big one is Industrious Incisors Bibarel, a card that let you draw until you've had 5 cards in your hand. Seeing play in a lot of different decks in combination with stuff like, what's its name, the Nestash guy, I think Squivert, that's it. You could put your hand on the bottom of the deck, draw 1, and then you could Bibarel to draw, 4 extra cards. It saw play in a lot of different decks. It saw play in, Charizard, in Arceus, all different kinds of stuff, and also in a lot of control decks as well. But probably the biggest loss from this set is going to be Luminion V, a card that is played in almost every deck. You bench it, and then you can just search for a support card. An incredibly, incredibly powerful card that, as I just said, is seen playing almost every deck in the format. It's seen playing Charizard, it's seen playing Dragapult, it sees playing Lugia, it sees playing Miraidon, it just sees play in so many different decks, and now it's just going to make getting a supporter card into your hand that much more difficult. Because before, where you could just, Ultra Ball for this, bench it, get a supporter, you now just have to hope to draw into one or play some more cards that allow you to draw through your deck. Or maybe we'll get a new Pokemon that lets you search for a supporter card. We'll just have to wait and see. As of the time of this video, the full set list for Journey Together hasn't been revealed yet, so that is always the possibility. In terms of supporters, items, tool cards, that kind of stuff, we have Sharon's Care leaving. That saw a lot of play in colorless type decks like Arceus, like Snorlax, which we'll get into later. Choice Belt's leaving the game, but V Pokemon aren't going to be in the game anymore, so that kind of doesn't affect anything. Collapse Stadium, that was a very good stadium card that allowed you to get rid of Lumineon off of your bench, because otherwise it's just going to sit there and it's an easy target to knock out. So you could put down Collapse Stadium, discard it off of the bench, and now it's not there for your opponent to just scoop up and take an easy KO. Magma Basin, that's going to hurt some stuff like Gouging Fire and other fire-based decks. I think Ceruledge plays it, I'm not entirely certain. I think some Charizard lists play it as well, some Regidrago lists as well, but yeah, that's just going to be a little bit of a downside. And then a really big one is Double Turbo Energy. This is a mainstay in a lot of decks. Lugia, Miraidon plays it, Pidgeot Control plays it, Clorf, Terrapagos plays it, Pure Terrapagos plays it, Iron Fawns plays it. There's so many decks that play this, because it's just 2 energy, but you do 20 less damage. Like, that's such a strong card. There's a reason why, double colorless energy is one of the best cards in the game. So that leaving the game is going to very much hurt Clorf and Terrapagos and Iron Fawns. They're now just going to have to rely more on other cards. Terrapagos has Glass Trumpet, which is kind of good because you can just get basic energy out of the discard, which means the deck now has to play basic energy, but it plays like a couple for its extra attack. So that isn't really a huge downside. It just means you're going to have to, get a little bit more set up in order to get your Terrapagos powered up and ready to attack. Clorf, I'm not entirely certain what's going to change with that, because Double Turbo was, really good in Clorf and stuff like that. Miraidon, it was used to help get your Ampi very much on Iron Hands powered up more easily, because then you just need 2 lightning and a double colorless. So now you're just going to have to hope that you hit Electric Generator more often. And then Iron Fawns, it's mainly seen play alongside Dragapult, so it doesn't really hurt it in that way. Another very big card leaving the game. So that's Brilliant Stars done. Let's move on to Astral Radiance. If I miss any cards at all, please let me know in the comments. I've only been playing the game for like a year, so I'm not entirely well versed on what the meta was like back in 2022. Let me know in the comments if I did miss anything of note. So Astral Radiance, this one introduced Origin Form Palkia V, a very, very strong card at the time, and even to this day is still very, very powerful. Subspace Swell, 60 damage plus 20 more damage for each benched Pokemon, both yours and your opponent's. Very, very powerful card, easily able to one-hit KO. Even in our current meta, with the use of Area Zero Underdepths and the Stellar Pokemon / Terra Pokemon, you can do even more damage. Plus its Star Portal ability let you attach free water energy from the discard pile to any of your water Pokemon, which can easily power itself up, as well as Radiant Greninja, the Radiant cards making their debut in this set. Radiant Heatran didn't really see much play, I don't think. Radiant Greninja, this was a staple, so many decks. Discard energy, draw 2 cards, and its Moonlight Shuriken let you do 90 damage to 2 of your opponent's Pokemon, but you had to discard 2 energy. You could use Origin Form Palkia to power it up with its Subspace, with its Star Portal ability, easily take out 2, basic Pokemon on the bench or any support Pokemon. And even if you weren't using the attack, the ability to just discard an energy and draw 2 cards meant it could see play in so many decks. Archelodon, because its ability allows you to get energy out of the discard, Ancient Box, Ceruledge, Gardevoir, Raging Bolt, Palkia, Goldengo, it just goes on, Lost Box, Giratina, so many different decks played this card. Limitless, the list just goes all the way down, from the regional in Melbourne, all the way up to even the Championship League in Osaka that we just had. That is how much this card saw play, and now it's going to be leaving the game. A very strong piece of consistency that let you draw through your deck, and for some decks, a very strong attacker. Luxray V, this saw a little bit of niche play in control decks, Fang Snipe your opponent reveals your hand and you discard a trainer card you find there. It's worth noting, it saw a little bit of play here and there. Darkrai V-Star saw a small amount of play in, Roaring Moon when it first came around, allowing you to get 2 item cards out of your deck, and it does more damage based on the amount of dark energy you had attached to it. Dialga V-Star, this was and is the main partner of Archelodon, but some Archelodon lists haven't been playing this card and it's still been doing well, but we'll just have to wait and see, how that affects Archelodon, because that's the deck's main partner. At the moment it's not doing much in our format, but in Japan it's doing quite well, so that might bring it down a little bit. Weirdia, this saw a little bit of play in Lugia V-Star decks. Giga Magnet, Magnezone, that saw a little bit of play with Origin Form Dialga and other steel-based decks, but we now have Matang, which is just a lot easier to set up. Arangaroo V, this saw a little bit of play in Cloth, allowing you to search your deck for a lot of tool cards if it's in the active spot. Right now, moving on to the trainer and supporter and item cards. So cancelling Cologne already, this one is really big, allowing you to basically turn off the ability of your opponent's active Pokemon. So if you were using something like Radiant Greninja, you could turn off Manaphy and now you can snap 2 Pokemon on the bench. Just a very good card for getting around some of your opponent's Pokemon. Silene, this saw playing control decks and like just some other stuff. I think it saw a little bit of playing Palkia. You flip 2 coins and for each head you put a card from your discard pile on top of your deck. Dark Patch, a big one for darkness type decks. Roaring Moon being our go-to darkness deck of the format. This is going to very, very much hurt its ability to get powered up. Featherball, this saw a little bit of play, allowing you to search out Pidgeot EX because it has no retreat. Gapejaw Bog, this saw a little bit of play with Hisui and Zoroark V, which didn't come out in this set, came out in a later set. Grant, this saw a tiny bit of play in some, I'm pretty sure, I'm not entirely certain. Gardenia's Vigor, this saw a little bit of play in some early grass decks. Hisuian Heavy Ball is a big one. Look at your face down prize cards, find a Pokemon, a basic Pokemon you find there, and put this card in its place. So now, if you're missing one of your key support Pokemon, or, it's just going to have to stay in the prizes and hope that you get it out, sadly. That's just how it's going to be from now on. Irida, really good piece of support for water decks, allowing you to get a water Pokemon and an item card, so that's going to be leaving. Roxanne, a very powerful comeback card. If your opponent has 3 or fewer prize cards remaining, both you shuffle your hand into your deck, and you draw 6 and your opponent draws 2. We do have Reset Stamp in the format, but it's an A spec and you can only play 1 A spec, so the option is still there for a comeback card, but Roxanne was just, a lot better, especially in decks that take a lot of time to get going. It's all playing stuff like Dragapult in a Lost Box and Giratina and all that kind of stuff. Very powerful card. Switch Cart, letting you switch out a basic Pokemon and also heal 30 damage, saw a lot of play in Lost Box, which we'll get into later on, allowing you to switch between all of your Comfies and start filling up your Lost Zone. Temple of Sinnoh, letting you turning off all special energy, which was an incredible card against stuff like Lugia. Trekking Shoes, another piece of support, allowing you to look at the top card of your deck. If you don't like it, draw a new card. There is a lot of good item cards and support cards leaving from this set. Not very much Pokemon, there's only a couple of good Pokemon in here that I mentioned, but the items, supporters, trainers, stadiums, all that kind of stuff, this set had a lot of good stuff. Next up, a bit of a small set, Pokemon Go. This was released on July 1st, 2022, and it just contained cards from Pokemon Go. It was a very small set, only comprised of 88 cards, but it does have a couple of noticeable ones. Some more Radiant Venusaur and Radiant Blastoise. Don't think they saw play, but Radiant Charizard definitely did. A very strong attacker in the late game for 1 fire and 4 colorless, but you can reduce its attack by 1 for each prize card your opponent's taken. So your opponent's taken 4 prize cards, it only costs a single fire energy. Sees a lot of play in Regidrago and Charizard because you can just attack for 250 damage for 1 energy, which is very, very powerful. And then the biggest one from this set is Snorlax Blocklax, as people like to call it. Snorlax Stall, a incredibly annoying card as long as it's in the active spot. Your opponent's active Pokemon can't retreat. People hated this card for a reason, and it's still a very good deck. Even at the regional in Toronto, it got 19th place, so it's still something to be reckoned with even to this day. 3 years later, it's still an incredibly powerful card, and many people are going to be so happy to see this card leave. I personally, from the decks that I've played, it was very annoying, but you kind of just have to expect control to be a thing, so you kind of have to build your deck around it, which is another thing this card did. People started building their decks around control and started adding in these little techs for control, so then the matchup kind of became a lot easier to get around. But the biggest one from this set is Pokestop. This card sees play in, again, so many different decks. Ancient Box, Ceruledge, Raging Bolt, Regidrago, allowing you to, mill the top 3 cards of your deck and add all item cards you find there. So if you mill 3 item cards, just get them all to your hand. For some decks it's a draw free, for some decks it's good at setting up your discard, like Ceruledge you could mill some energy, Ancient Box you could mill some energy as well so you can get them back, Regidrago you could mill some dragon Pokemon, all that kind of stuff. Now moving on to probably one of the biggest sets of 2022, Lost Origin, and I'm going to start off straight away. The Lost Box engine, Comfey, Cramorant, Chorus's Experiment, Giratina V-Star, Goodra V-Star, Lost City, Lost Vacuum, Mirage Gate, all of those cards are going. Lost Box is probably one of the strongest engines in the game because it's just so splashable. You could put it with pretty much anything and have it do good. You could play it with Giratina, you could play it with Goodra, you could even play it with stuff that we currently have in the game. You could play it with Pikachu, I don't know, Dragapult. Like, there are so many Lost Box decks that have been around ever since the set came out, all the way up until the recent regional in Toronto. And the hits don't stop there, because another V card that saw a lot of play in a lot of decks alongside stuff like Lumineon was Rotom V. The insta-charge ability letting you draw 3 cards but it ends your turn. A very strong card to use in the early game for getting extra cards for your next turn, and it's also just a V Pokemon that you could use for some other cards that we'll be getting later on, especially in Silver Tempest. But it was just an incredibly powerful card, especially again in the early game. If it's your first turn, you know, you could do a bunch of stuff, bench Rotom and just draw 3 cards. So now all the cards that you've gotten rid of in your hand are now just back, and you've got an even bigger hand for next turn. Drapion V, they started seeing a little bit of play to counteract some stuff. It mainly saw play when Mew VMAX was around, but that's out of the game now, so it didn't really see that much play. Pidgeot V, this saw a little bit of play in control decks because you could use Forest Seal Stone and then it could shuffle itself back into the deck so you don't mill yourself out. Radiant Hisui and Sneasler, this saw play, or sees play in Cloth as an ability to put more poison damage on your opponent's Pokemon, so it saw play with the Petrant with its toxic subjugation, which means you put 5 more damage counters on, so depending on the situation you could just win the game on the spot if you're up against an evolution deck. Radiant Steelix didn't really see some play. Banette with its Puppet Offering saw a little bit of play, allowing you to get a support card from your discard pile and then put it into the Lost Zone. Gengar with its Neverworld Curse saw a little bit of play in Hisui and Zoroark V, which also made its debut in this set. It does 50 damage times each Pokemon that has a damage counter on it, so you could easily put some damage counters into play, but Hisui and Zoroark V hasn't really seen much play since then, which is another card that's going to be leaving. Irizu, this one might not be relevant now. Later on, especially after the release of our next set, Prismatic Evolution, this is going to be a popular card for evolution decks because we're getting Badoo, so this is probably going to see play in stuff like Dragapult, stuff like Gardevoir. It saw a little bit of play in some random Lugia decks for some reason, but this is going to see more play after our next set, and then it's only going to be legal for a couple of months, and then it's going to go out of the format. Some other item and support cards, you know, Damage Pump, so playing Hisui and Zoroark, I'm pretty sure. So playing Gardevoir for like a little bit. Thornton, a powerful card that let you put a basic Pokemon in place of another basic Pokemon in play, and it, you know, remembers turns in play, all that kind of stuff, so you could get rid of like a V Pokemon, put on a basic Pokemon, and then like Rare Candy into a really good, you know, Rare Candy into your main Pokemon. Misfortune Sisters, another card that saw play in control decks. You can look at the top 5 cards of your opponent's deck and discard any item cards you find there. Lost Vacuum I already mentioned, but this card saw play outside of Lost Zone, letting you just get rid of a Stadium or a Tool card. Another very strong card, Gift Energy, another special energy that will be leaving. If your Pokemon is knocked out while it has an attack, you can draw until you have 7 cards. So this set was a very big set for the time, and all of these cards are going to be going. Some of the biggest ones here are obviously the Lost Zone engine, Rotom V, some of the supporters, Lost Vacuum, obviously stuff like that. Chorus's Experiment even saw play outside of the Lost Zone engine. Irizu, it's going to see play for a little bit of time and then it's going to go out of the game. Thornton is a big one. Yeah, another really big set that's going to be leaving. And then we had our final, well not the final set released in 2022, but the 4th main set being Silver Tempest. Another really big set. Alolan Vulpix V saw a little bit of niche play because, you know, it couldn't take damage from Pokemon with abilities and stuff like that. So I saw a little bit of plays like a little control deck. Regieleki VMAX saw a little bit of play with Miraidon in the early days, but not so much. Radiant Alakazam, this is a very powerful card that has become a staple in Dragapult, allowing you to move around the damage that you put on your opponent's Pokemon. Another really good Radiant card that's going to be leaving the game. Refinement Curlier, this is going to heavily hurt the consistency of Gardevoir. Basically, discard a card and draw 2 cards. So Gardevoir now can't churn through its deck incredibly quickly. It's going to have to either get rid of Curlies altogether and just play more Rare Candy, or play a different Curly or all that kind of stuff, because we are going to have Badoo in the format, and if you get rid of your mid-stage evolution and then you get Badoo locked, you kind of just lost right there and then. Radiant Serena saw a little bit of play, allowing you to heal 20 damage from I think it's all of your Pokemon? Yeah, all of your Pokemon. So a little bit of play here and there. Radiant Jirachi, I'm pretty sure this one didn't see a lot of play. And then we get to the 2 biggest ones, Regidrago V-Star and Lugia V-Star. 2 of probably the most powerful decks in the game, like just ever. Regidrago V-Star, it came out and it pretty much did absolutely nothing because the current Dragon Pokemon in the game could just, play themselves a lot better than Regidrago. But once we got the release of Dragapult V as well as Ogerpon EX, this deck quickly became one of the best decks in the game because it was Dragapult, but a lot more efficient and a lot faster. Not to mention that it basically had any dragon attack at its disposal. You could not only use Dragapult, you could use Giratina, you could use the new Kyurem, which allowed you to just hit 3 Pokemon on the bench for 110 damage. It's a card that can very easily just go through its entire deck very quickly, and it's going to be leaving the game. Some people will say hurrah, I also say hurrah because I do not like this card. It had its time in the spotlight and now it doesn't have its time in the spotlight. And then another card that a lot of people are going to be happy to leave, Lugia V-Star. This card is ridiculous, and to an extent I'll also include Archeops alongside it because that was the deck's main partner. So Lugia has the Summoning Star ability that lets you put 2 colorless Pokemon that don't have a rule box when you discard pile onto your bench. That means you can just put Archeops straight onto your bench without needing to put the Fossil down and then evolve into Arch and then evolve into Archeops. Archeops says you can search your deck 2 special energy cards and attach them to your Pokemon in any way you like. And back when this deck first came out, there was a lot of very good special energy cards because we had all the ones from the deregulation mark. And because of that, this deck was ridiculous. And even to this day, this deck is still incredibly annoying and incredibly powerful, because you have so many different special energies at your disposal. You have Gift Energy, Jet Energy, Double Turbo Energy, Mist Energy, and of course Legacy Energy, which allows you to make use of stuff like Wellspring Mask Ogerpon and Iron Hands EX. So a lot of people are going to be very, very happy to see Lugia finally go. Another deck that when it released became pretty much the best deck in the game, and even to this day is still a very, very powerful deck. Some other noteworthy cards, Forest Sealstone. This is something that was played in pretty much any deck that didn't have a dedicated V-Star power, like stuff like Lugia, Regidrago, Palkia, and it was basically Arceus, but you search for 1 card. And you could just attach it to any V Pokemon and just use it straight away. Capturing Aroma saw play in Lugia mainly. Lance, this is going to start seeing play with the release of Badoo, especially in Dragapult, allowing you to search for your Dracoloaks and your Dragapults and Treepies to an extent. Serena, this saw again a little bit of play in stuff like Lugia. It's seen a little bit of play in Archlodon, allowing you to discard 3 cards and then draw until you have 5, or you can switch your opponent's bench V Pokemon into the active. And I think that's kind of it for Silver Tempest. Very impactful for the game, and after it's gone from the game, I'm pretty sure a lot of people are going to be happy, especially since Lugia is going. I hate Lugia. Then the last set is Crown Zenith. This one was mainly a reprint set, but it did have, a couple of new cards here and there. Luxray, with his explosiveness ability, saw a little bit of play here and there. Zamazenta saw some play in Dialga Matang as a way to, do a lot of damage for retaliation. Zamazenta V saw a little bit of play in Goodra, Arceus builds. And that's pretty much it for this set. Again, it was mainly a reprint set. It had a couple of new cards here and there, but not a whole lot. So overall, this rotation is going to have a massive impact on the game. We're going to be losing, entire decks like Regidrago, Lugia, Palkia. We're going to be losing the entire Lost Zone engine. We're also going to be losing a lot of staple supporters and, support Pokemon. We're going to be losing all the Radiants. We're going to be losing Lumineon V, Rotom V. We're going to be losing supporters like Thornton, Roxanne, Irida, all that kind of stuff. And it's going to be completely wiping decks off the format, but also severely crippling a lot of other decks. Charizard's going to lose us a lot of support. Raging Bolt kind of doesn't lose a lot. It loses Radiant Greninja and Switch Cart, which, cool. It loses Pokestop. but it still has, you know, like decent draw support. Gardevoir loses its draw support, loses a Radiant Greninja and a bunch of other stuff like that. Dragapult loses, you know, 2 of its best support cards, Lumineon and Rotom. It also loses some good supporters, including supporters that it's going to only recently start playing. Terrapagos loses double colorless energy, or double turbo energy, so now it's going to have to maybe start playing Glass Trumpet and basic energies. Archelodon loses its best partner, being Dialga. The list just goes on. Like, I could make this video longer than it already is, but I'm not going to. You get the idea. This rotation and format that we're going to be going into is going to be a big change. The rotation for us isn't until April, but for Japan, I believe it is on the release of Journey Together, or as they're calling it, Battle Partners, I'm pretty sure. So yeah, for them, Battle Partners releases on January 24th, which is when their rotation will happen. So we will get a sneak peek of what the format could possibly look like come April. What decks are going to be heavily affected, you know, already existing decks that don't completely go, how they're going to, you know, play through the format. What new decks might come up from the new set, because there are some pretty good cards in the new set. Still waiting for the full set list before I make a video about it. We'll just have to wait and see, but the impact of this rotation is going to be huge for the game. And that is it for this video. I know it is a very long one, but there's just a lot to talk about. I'd like to thank you all for watching. Let me know your thoughts in the comments, how you think this rotation is going to impact the game. Are you going to have to, you know, pick up a new deck? Are you one of the people playing Regidrago? Are you one of the people playing Lugia, so you're going to have to pick up a completely new deck? Are you someone like me who's playing a deck that is going to survive rotation? I play Dragapult, so, you know, how do you think the deck is going to survive rotation? How do you think it's going to adapt to the new format? Let me know in the comments. Thank you all for watching. Remember to like, comment and subscribe for future videos, and I shall see you in that next video, whatever it may be. Take care.